We are back in Homer. We're out on the ski trail, having my little morning cup of herb tea.
The quiet stillness of the Alaskan wilderness was shattered when investigators stepped out of Atz Kilcher's old camper, faces pale, voices tense, and hands shaking from what they had just uncovered. This wasn't just any camper. For decades, Atz kept it tucked away behind a thick wall of spruce trees miles away from the homestead, hidden so well that even longtime Kilcher followers never knew it existed. Family members always brushed off questions about it, calling it nothing important. But that story collapsed the moment the door was forced open earlier today. What the team discovered inside wasn't ordinary, wasn't harmless, and definitely wasn't expected. The air inside felt heavy, stale, and strangely untouched, as if the entire space had been frozen in time on a day when something went very wrong. Scattered across the floor were broken objects, arranged in ways that made no sense. Personal belongings twisted into unsettling patterns, and deeper in the shadows was a concealed section no one was prepared to find. Officials aren't releasing every detail yet, but one thing is already clear. This discovery is disturbing enough that the Kilcher family is now directly involved. And before we move deeper into what investigators are calling one of the most unsettling finds connected to the Kilcher legacy, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the shocking details still to come. For years, the one thing that confused even those closest to Atz Kilcher was why he guarded that old camper with such fierce, almost obsessive privacy. People who lived on the homestead for decades said the same thing. Atz would talk openly about his music, his past struggles, his survival skills, and even the darkest moments of his childhood. But whenever the camper was mentioned, his entire demeanor changed. His voice tightened, his eyes shifted, and without fail, he would redirect the conversation or walk away entirely. The camper wasn't just off-limits. It was treated like a sealed vault, holding something he couldn't let go of and didn't want anyone else to see. Some family members admitted that they had never set foot near it, because Atz would always say it wasn't safe, or that it was unfinished. But the tone he used made them feel like it was better not to ask questions. Even Jewel once hinted in an interview that her father kept certain places on the property emotionally locked, places tied to wounds he never fully healed from. And this camper, sitting miles away from the main homestead and tucked so deeply into the woods that even hunters rarely passed by, was one of them. The isolation wasn't accidental. Atz chose that spot intentionally, a place far from the noise of the homestead, far from the pressure of cameras, far from the expectations of viewers who saw him as the calm, wise, humorous leader of the Kilcher family. But what most people don't know is that Atz didn't always retreat to this camper for peace. Those close to him say that during harsh winters, personal crises, or moments when old trauma resurfaced, he disappeared into that camper for hours, sometimes even days, without explanation. During those periods, no one dared disturb him. Not because they feared for their safety, but because they could sense he was fighting something internal, something heavier than the lifestyle challenges shown on television. Some believed he used the place to battle memories of his strict upbringing under Yule Kilcher, whose methods were often described as harsh, demanding, and emotionally cold. Others whispered that the camper held moments of Atz's emotional breakdowns, moments he never wanted his children or the outside world to witness. A former crew member from Alaska, the Last Frontier, even claimed that production was told to stay away from that section of the forest entirely, no matter what was happening on the homestead. They were told it was personal, off-limits, and not to be filmed under any circumstances. Over time, rumors grew. Some said Atz kept the camper locked because it was a storage spot for old journals documenting the darkest days of his past. Others believed it was where he went to confront his nightmares, far from the people he loved. But nobody ever expected that investigators, of all people, would be the ones to finally step inside. Whatever Atz was hiding, whatever memories or secrets he shielded from the world, it was significant enough that even his family respected the boundary without question. Now, with that boundary broken for the first time in decades, the disturbing truth behind his isolation is beginning to surface. And what investigators found inside is already painting a much darker picture than anyone ever imagined. When investigators stepped deeper into Atz Kilcher's camper, they immediately sensed something was off, something far beyond the clutter. Dust and forgotten tools scattered across the floor. The interior looked smaller than expected, almost unnaturally tight, as if the space itself had secrets hidden within its walls. One investigator ran his hand along a section of the wooden paneling and noticed something unusual. The boards didn't line up perfectly. They were slightly raised, uneven, and reinforced with nails far newer than the rest of the camper's aging structure. That was the first hint that a hidden space existed. After inspecting the panels more closely, they found faint scratch marks near the seams, as if the wall had been opened and closed repeatedly by someone who knew exactly where the entry point was. With careful pressure and a pry tool, the team removed the loose panels and revealed a narrow, concealed passage, barely wide enough for one person to slide through sideways. Inside, the air was colder, stiller, and filled with the unmistakable scent of aged wood mixed with something metallic, something unsettling. This hidden compartment wasn't hastily built. It was deliberately crafted. The walls were lined with old timber boards that looked hand-cut, the kind Atz himself would have milled. The small space was dim, with only a tiny sliver of light seeping in from a makeshift vent Atz had carved out years ago. What they discovered inside shocked them more than anything they had seen in the outer camper. There were notebooks stacked in uneven piles, some water-damaged, some scorched at the edges, and others tightly bound with improvised twine. There was a handmade stool positioned directly beneath the vent, as if Atz sat there for hours at a time, using the limited light to write, carve, or simply sit in the silence. Next to it lay a broken guitar neck, its strings removed, its wood carved with deep grooves that resembled tally marks, hundreds of them. Investigators found a small metal tin containing charcoal pieces, burned matches, and a folded cloth stained with something they couldn't immediately identify. It didn't look like blood, but it didn't look normal either. The most disturbing part was the arrangement of personal objects placed with unsettling precision. A smooth river stone wrapped in braided twine, a pair of old work gloves hardened by time, a drawing carved into a thin plank showing a figure alone in the woods, and a short message carved next to it that read, "Only here can I breathe." This wasn't a storage room. It was a retreat, an emotional bunker, a place where Atz went not to hide from the world, but to confront a part of himself that he couldn't show publicly. People always admired Atz's resilience, his calm exterior, his ability to turn pain into music and wisdom. But this hidden room revealed a deeper truth. He had been fighting battles long before the cameras ever arrived. Battles he didn't want anyone to witness. And now, investigators were standing in the very place where those battles unfolded, piece by piece, carving by carving, tally mark by tally mark. What they found in this hidden space didn't just raise questions, it completely shattered the quiet image of Atz's private life and hinted at emotional scars even his closest family members may not have known existed. The deeper investigators moved into the camper, the more disturbing the discoveries became. And nothing was more unsettling than the collection of items scattered across the inner shelves and floor. At first glance, they looked like random belongings tossed aside over the years, but the longer the team examined them, the clearer it became that each object held emotional weight, as if Atz had stored pieces of his past here during moments he didn't want the world to see. One of the first things they found was a battered mandolin with its body cracked open, the strings cut, and the interior burned in a way that couldn't have been accidental. The scorch marks suggested the instrument had been thrown into a fire and pulled out before it was destroyed completely. Nearby, a guitar fretboard was snapped clean, in half, the edges worn down like it had been gripped too tightly for too long. There were stains on the wood investigators couldn't immediately identify, darker than rot, yet not resembling anything natural. Then there were the journals, dozens of them. Some were intact, others torn apart with pages missing, and several were half burned as if someone had tried to destroy them but hesitated at the last second. The surviving pages contained rough sketches of mountains, storms, and lonely figures standing beside cabins. Others showed frantic handwriting, single sentences repeated over and over, like, "Stay awake," "Don't leave," and "Not again." Scattered beside the journals were pieces of survival gear, some standard, some modified in ways that suggested desperation rather than practicality. A hunting knife with a handle wrapped in electrical tape, a tin cup dented from what looked like repeated impact, and a survival blanket cut into strips, as though Atz had tried to create makeshift restraints or bandages during a moment of distress. But the carvings were perhaps the most disturbing discovery. On several small wooden slabs, stacked neatly in a corner, were etched images of wolves surrounding a lone man, and on others, chaotic patterns that resembled storms, collapsing trees, and scenes of isolation deep in the forest. One carving, in particular, stood out, a depiction of a cabin split in two, with a figure standing on one side facing away from the other half. It was too deliberate to be random and too emotional to be dismissed as simple artwork. Every object in this cramped camper seemed to reflect inner turmoil, emotional pain, or memories Atz could neither erase nor face directly. And as investigators gathered the items for further analysis, one thing was becoming clear. Whatever haunted Atz during the years he used this camper left behind a trail of signs far darker than anyone expected, revealing struggles he kept hidden from nearly everyone around him. Among all the unsettling discoveries inside Atz Kilcher's camper, nothing raised more questions than the pile of burned notes investigators found buried beneath a crate near the hidden compartment. Dozens of charred pages were fused together, edges curled and blackened from heat, but the center of many pages survived just enough for fragments of Atz's handwriting to remain. Each page seemed to capture thoughts written during moments of emotional strain, moments he clearly never wanted anyone else to read. Some fragments were short, almost like panicked reminders. "Not tonight. Stay moving. Don't let it in." Others were longer, written in shaky strokes that suggested fear or exhaustion. One note read, "The dreams are getting worse. I hear him again outside the window, but no one is there." Investigators couldn't determine if "him" referred to a person, an animal, or a memory haunting him, but the repetition across several burned pages suggested it was something Atz genuinely feared. Another page was more cryptic, saying, "If the storm hits again, I won't make the same mistake. This time, I'm ready." The word "ready" was underlined multiple times, carved deep into the paper as if the pen nearly tore through. Scattered among the notes were pages containing lists, supplies, locations around the homestead, names of family members, and something labeled unfinished conversations. Next to some names were small symbols, some crossed out, others circled. One partially burned page seemed to contain lyrics, but the tone was unlike any of Atz's known songs. Cold wind in the doorway, footsteps in the pine, shadows in the distance calling out a name that isn't mine. But the most disturbing fragment was a larger piece with a message that seemed halfway between a confession and a warning. If they ever find this place, they'll know why I had to hide. Some memories don't fade. They wait. The bottom half of that page was burned away, leaving behind only ash and faint pencil marks. The notes collectively suggested that Atz used the camper as a place to confront recurring nightmares, traumatic memories from his past, and possibly fears he believed were following him into adulthood. These writings weren't meant for music, storytelling, or family legacy. They were raw thoughts from moments he didn't want anyone to witness. Investigators left the burned pages untouched after documenting them, realizing they offered a rare, unsettling glimpse into a private struggle Atz deliberately tried to erase. And yet, even in their damaged state, they reveal more than he ever spoke aloud. The item that truly shocked investigators wasn't the burned notes or broken instruments. It was the emergency kit hidden under a loose floorboard, a kit unlike anything they expected from Atz Kilcher. At first glance, it looked like normal survival gear, but opening it revealed something far darker. Inside were handmade medical tools, crude scalpels sharpened from scrap metal, cloth bandages cut from old flannel shirts, and a small bottle filled with a dark liquid that had no label. Next to it was a note that read, "Use only when it gets bad again." The kit also contained hand-drawn maps, not of regular hiking trails, but of obscure routes leading away from the main homestead and deep into remote mountain ridges. Some were marked with X's, others with arrows, as if Atz had planned several escape paths for situations no one else knew about. Investigators then found a small pouch with improvised weapons, a wooden club wrapped tightly in leather strips, a bone-carved blade sharpened to a point, and a reinforced slingshot that showed clear signs of use. But the most disturbing item was a folded paper titled "If I Ever Disappear," written in Atz's unmistakable handwriting. The list beneath it was short but chilling. Don't check the river first. Only follow tracks at dawn. Give it 1 week before telling them. And North Ridge is safest. Some lines were crossed out or rewritten as if he had revisited the note many times. Tucked behind the list was an old photograph of the homestead, taken from a distance, the edges torn, and the back marked only with a date from a harsh winter long past. Nothing else explained its meaning. The kit didn't look like preparation for ordinary emergencies. It looked like preparation for something Atz believed might force him to run, hide, or survive alone under extreme circumstances. It was a glimpse into fears he never spoke of, fears far deeper than the rugged persona he showed the world. What investigators found carved into the camper walls added an entirely new layer of unease to the already disturbing discoveries. Dozens of markings, some small, some large, were etched into the wooden panels with precision, as if Atz Kilcher had spent countless nights creating them. At first, the symbols looked random, just scratches made during repairs, but as investigators examined them under better light, they realized every symbol was nearly identical. It was a circle split by a vertical line, with 3 short dashes branching off the right side. The pattern repeated on the walls, the shelves, the inside of the hidden compartment, and even on a carved plank tucked beneath the makeshift stool. Some marks were faint and unfinished, while others were dug so deeply into the wood that splinters curled outward. Experts who later reviewed photos of the markings said the symbol didn't match any known brand, family crest, or common Alaskan homestead marking. Instead, it resembled something personal, like a mental anchor or a private reminder Atz used to focus his mind. One investigator suggested that the symbols might represent episodes of isolation, moments when Atz retreated into the camper to regain control or confront whatever darkness he was battling. The symbols were grouped in clusters. Some appeared in neat rows, others circled around a specific area on the wall, as if marking a place he sat frequently. The most chilling cluster was found inside the hidden compartment. 14 symbols carved tightly together, each one deeper than the last, as though Atz carved them in rapid succession during a moment of intense distress. Beneath that cluster was a single message scratched roughly into the wood: "Keep the noise out." The phrase didn't appear anywhere else in the camper. Nearby, investigators also found a carved outline of a hand, its fingers elongated and uneven, almost frantic-looking. It wasn't artistic, more like something etched during panic or fear. The placement of the handprint directly beside the symbol cluster suggested a connection investigators still can't fully interpret. The repetition, the intensity, and the secrecy of the symbols hinted at a coping ritual, something Atz turned to when writing, music, and solitude weren't enough. Each carving reinforced the idea that the camper wasn't a workspace or storage area. It was a sanctuary where Atz confronted memories, fears, or internal battles he didn't share with anyone. And the walls, marked with these strange symbols, silently documented every moment he tried to keep those battles contained. When the Kilcher family was finally informed about what investigators uncovered inside Atz's hidden camper, their reactions were a mixture of shock, heartbreak, and a deep sense of recognition. Jewel was one of the first to respond, and according to those close to her, she wasn't surprised that her father kept a private place to process his emotions, but she never imagined it held carvings, burned journals, and escape maps. She reportedly said that her father had always carried heavy memories from their childhood, memories he turned into music, but never fully explained. Shane reacted with the most visible concern. He had grown up watching Atz disappear into the woods for long stretches of time, but he always believed it was for songwriting or quiet reflection. Discovering that the camper contained symbols carved during apparent distress and a detailed plan for disappearing made him fear that his father was dealing with more internal pain than he ever let his children see. Atz Lee struggled with the idea as well. He had always admired his father's strength and resilience, but learning that Atz kept journals filled with fear-driven writing and created an isolated bunker during emotional turmoil forced him to reconsider everything he thought he understood about their family's past. Some family members admitted privately that Atz's upbringing under Yule left lasting wounds, strict discipline, emotional distance, and a harsh environment that shaped him into a survivor, but also left scars too deep to discuss openly. The camper, in their eyes, wasn't just a secret. It was a manifestation of decades of unspoken pain. The production team from Alaska: The Last Frontier was equally stunned. Several crew members revealed that they were instructed never to film in that direction, never to follow Atz into the deep woods, and never to ask questions when he vanished for hours. Now, those instructions suddenly made sense. What disturbed the family most wasn't the items themselves, but what they represented. Years of internal battles Atz fought alone, without leaning on the people who loved him. The carvings, burned notes, escape kit, and hidden room weren't signs of danger. They were signs that Atz was trying to contain something that haunted him, something he didn't want his family to inherit. As the Kilchers processed the discovery, one thing became painfully clear. This camper wasn't just a secret shelter. It was a window into the emotional storms Atz weathered in silence. And now that the truth had surfaced, the family was left to confront the reality of what he endured and what he never spoke out loud. In the hours after, investigators finished documenting the camper and sealing it off. The question everyone asked was simple: what happens now? The Kilcher family gathered privately to discuss whether the camper should be dismantled, preserved, or left untouched as a personal memorial to the struggles Atz kept hidden for decades. Some believed tearing it down would finally close a chapter he never wanted reopened, while others felt that preserving it might help future generations understand the quiet battles he fought alone. Before any decisions were made, investigators revealed one final discovery: a small audio recorder tucked inside a wooden box beneath the stool in the hidden compartment. The recorder contained a short message from Atz, spoken in a calm, almost exhausted voice. He said he built the camper's hidden spaces during a time when he felt overwhelmed by memories of his upbringing and the pressure of being the family's emotional anchor. He described the carvings as markers, symbols that helped him stay grounded when his thoughts spiraled, and the burned notes as things he wrote when the weight became too heavy. He admitted the emergency kit was created during a period when he feared he might isolate himself too far from loved ones and wanted a plan in case he ever lost control or disappeared intentionally. But the most powerful line in the recording was his final one: "If you're hearing this, it means the storm passed, and I survived it. Just remember, everyone has a place where they hide their pain." Hearing those words left the family silent. It reframed the entire discovery, not as evidence of danger, but as proof of how deeply Atz fought to keep his darkest moments from spilling into the lives of those he loved. In the end, the family decided the camper wouldn't be destroyed or exposed publicly. Instead, it would remain sealed, protected, and left exactly as Atz last used it, a quiet reminder that even the strongest survivors carry shadows no one can see. And as news of the discovery spreads beyond the homestead, it becomes clear that this strange, disturbing camper doesn't just reveal secrets about Atz Kilcher's past. It reveals the universal truth that every person, no matter how resilient they appear, battles storms the world never knows about.